Today we're joined with Dr Latif. He was a former AYP trustee and currently a doctor.
So Latif,
Hi.
we heard that when you were at AYP, two young people came to you and asked you that whether or not girls fart, and you told them that they don't. So do you still believe that it's true?
At the risk of my wife hearing this question, girls definitely don't fart. Definitely not.
I personally haven't heard the story, so do you mind sharing it with me?
Yeah. So, as I said, strictly speaking, no, girls don't fart. Yeah, as I said, because if my wife heard me say the opposite, I'd be a dead man. But yeah, I remember when I was a youth worker at AYP. I say not so long ago, it was quite a while ago, and I was asked about whether there was such a thing as a fart gland. I have to say, as in my career as a doctor, that's probably one of the top 5 weirdest questions I've ever been asked. Pushing it maybe top 4. So, yeah, and I think initially I just messed around and said, yeah, there is a fart gland. Men have a fart gland, women don't have a fart gland, and but then I felt sorry for misleading everyone. Obviously, there's no such thing as a fart gland. Sorry to say.
So, speaking of you being a doctor, are you currently working on the front line?
Yeah. So there's so I'm just to clarify, I'm currently a cancer doctor, and well, coronavirus unfortunately doesn't discriminate. It's hit our patients quite hard, the same way it's hit a lot of the general public. My job at the moment in the NHS is to maintain my cancer patients' health as well as possible during the epidemic. I'm at work on a daily basis, seeing patients on a daily basis when they come into hospital, although a lot of the time we are not seeing them face-to-face anymore. We're doing it over the telephone. And the ones that come into hospital with coronavirus, we definitely have to see our patients and treat them face-to-face. There's been a fair few cases, especially I just worked off the bank holiday weekend where I worked 2 of the days of the bank holiday. I dealt with quite a few coronavirus positive patients, and you've got to dress up with the mask and the apron and the visor, and you just got to help them really. So but it's getting better, one step at a time, but we're getting there.
You've heard some crazy stories during your time at work, so could you tell us about the one involving the showerhead?
Oh, it sounds like someone's told you about that one already. I was a fairly junior doctor, so I was a second-year doctor, and I was working in A&E. Very, very busy shift, and it was towards the end of my shift when a nurse came to me. She was very, very worried. She said that I had to see a certain patient right away, and that she was very worried about him. She said that he was holding his abdomen. He looked like he was in a lot of pain and a lot of discomfort, and he was walking really funny. So I quickly went to see the patient in one of the cubicles, and in one of these cubicles there's a man. He's standing up, so he can't sit down. He's with his wife, and he's holding his tummy. And
What is Doctor here? Why is he here?
Hey, tell us about this shower head incident. I want to know more about that. That's what I want to know more about.
I was right in the middle of it, mate. All right.
No,
So
I'm so sorry.
Oh, again, let's start it again, lads.
You yourself, brother.
What was that?
I don't think we should cut this out. I think this is hilarious. So yeah, I was. So I walked into this cubicle, and I saw this man holding his abdomen, and he was with his wife, and I just said, okay, what's going on? What's the problem? And essentially, I'll try and cut this long story short. He started off talking about how he was constipated, how he hadn't gone to the toilet for many days, how he was struggling every day, how he tried to drink more water, how he had tried to eat more fruit, etc. And then he read of a solution online, and he practiced this solution. And now, rather than having constipation, he's got severe diarrhea. So I asked him, what was this solution? So he tells me that he disconnected the shower head from the hose, and he, on a daily basis for 5 days, shoved the end of the hose pipe up his back passage. And he would switch the water on you've got to understand, you've got to keep a straight face when someone tells you a story like this. So I asked him, so how long would you switch the water on for? And was it at full force or was it at half force? Just to get an idea how much volume of water this man was getting up his back passage. And essentially he was getting a considerable amount of water up his back passage every day for 5 days. Not surprisingly, on the day 5, he had experienced severe abdominal pain, and it all came out in one massive gush. I felt sorry for him. He was in a lot of pain. I didn't know whether I believed him, to be honest with you, whether that was actually what he was trying to do or whether he was maybe trying to have a little fun. But he cleared it all out. We scanned his abdomen with a CT scan because it's actually very dangerous what he did to himself. He could have easily created a hole in his colon and he could have died from it. But thankfully, he was okay. And he went home the next day. But it was an interesting dynamic, really. His wife sitting there just sort of looking lovingly at him and him telling me how he put a hose pipe up his backside. But there we go.
What do you think the hardest part about your job is?
Actually, I actually really enjoy my job. I think I'm extremely privileged to do my job. I think there is no better job with a satisfaction rate like my job, because no matter what I do for patients, I think I help them. I think that's the hardest part of my job, is sometimes, especially with the current economic climate, especially with how run down the NHS has become and how difficult it is for patients to access healthcare, it sometimes feels like you can't give the best service and healthcare and treatment to your patients that you would like to do. I find that extremely difficult. I don't mind, there's a lot of stereotypes about doctors dealing with death and doctors dealing with busy hours, late shifts, on-calls. I'm supposed to go to a night on-call in the next hour. I don't mind any of that at all. On the contrary, I enjoy that. But I really, really hate it when I look at a patient and I can tell that they are pissed off because the service they've received is rubbish or that they are unwell and I can't do anything about it because I'm limited by the system that I'm working in.
What would you say is the most enjoyable thing about your job?
I love feeling like I've done a positive thing to my patient's life. I like feeling like I've made their life better, made them feel better, improved something about their life. It's always very nice seeing a patient smile, feel better. In my department, I work in cancer, and there are there's plenty of times where I can with confidence tell my patients that we've cured their cancer, or that their cancer is getting better, and there are no better moments than being able to feel like you've done that to someone's life, actually.
Have you ever seen someone die in front of you?
Yeah, I get asked this a fair few times, especially with my department being cancer medicine. Death is unfortunately a big part of the job. We deal with dying or people close to dying quite often. Now, it might sound controversial, but there is such a thing as a good death. And actually, there's nothing better you can give someone in that situation than a good death. And that's what we strive to do in our job. You want to make sure that a patient's wishes are taken into consideration, that they're not in any pain or discomfort, that their family are with them. Essentially, you want to give them the most comfort and the most calm that you can in a time which is potentially quite worrying and quite traumatic. The other side of the coin are patients who die unexpectedly. or patients who aren't supposed to die, who, you know, either because their heart stops or their lungs stop. And that's happened a fair few times in my career. And naturally, you have to do CPR. You have to try and resuscitate them and get them back to life. And that is an extremely dramatic set of events. What I would say is, it's not like the movies. It's not like TV shows. It never is. It's not as it rarely works. That's the first thing. It's not as clean as in the TV shows. When people go through something like that, there is a lot of fluid left, right, and center: blood, bodily fluids, smells, noise. You know, in order to do CPR, you've got to break ribs in order to do it properly. So people watch Holby City and Casualty, and they don't realize that that is what has to end up happening when you try and resuscitate someone and bring them back to life. So it's fairly traumatic. So I've seen death from both sides, the unexpected and the expected, and the best we can do is try to make it as good as possible for our patients. And actually, after a while, you become desensitized to it as a doctor. You become as a part parcel of your life, your daily routine, and your job to deal with death and dying. And it's about how you manage it and how you manage it yourself personally, but also with your patients.
Were there any deaths that really affected you?
I think every death has its own sort of story. Especially in my line of work, a lot of the patients that I meet regularly. So some of our patients we see on a weekly basis. You know, I end up knowing their family members' names. I end up knowing their pets' names. I end up knowing, you know, what they do for a living, what they do for hobbies. They give me Christmas gifts. I give them cards. You know, like I get a really close relationship to my patients. And any one of them that has passed away, it makes you sad, you know. But a death that I really remember quite vividly actually is near the beginning of my career, when I was on the ward, and we had a lady who was 92, I think, and her 93-year-old husband, and they'd been married for 60 years or more. And she was actually fit to go home. She was ready to go. She was all dressed to go home. And then 2 minutes before she was supposed to go home, she tried to get off the bed, stand up, and then she said that she felt dizzy. She collapsed onto the bed and unfortunately became unrousable. Now, the immediate response to that is this was an unexpected event and that we had to try and resuscitate and revive the patient. But resuscitation in someone who is that elderly with a significant burden of cancer is never a good idea. So I was the doctor there in that room, and I had to make a decision between whether we should resuscitate this lady or not. So that was the first difficult decision. And the second difficult thing to do was this poor husband of hers. You know, imagine he's been married to her for more than 60 years. And he's ready to go home with his wife. And then all of a sudden she just collapses on the bed. So balancing both of those things at the same time was exceptionally difficult. And so what I did was I quickly took the husband outside. I told the nurses to start basic life support. And I quickly calmed the husband down, told him we were going to do what we needed to do. And I remember to this day doing this, I quickly ran downstairs to where my consultant was in his room. And I dragged him up to the ward. I'm like, you have to come up now. This is a difficult situation. And so I knew what the consultant was going to do, and there's a reason why I brought him, because the consultant knew this family very well, better than I did. And we quickly stopped resuscitating the patient because we could recognize that it was the end. We quickly went back to the husband, and we had to break the news that unfortunately, although unexpectedly, his wife had passed away. And I think you could see the shock in his eyes, followed by you could almost see his years of marriage, companionship, love, all that sort of fleet through, you know, in those seconds where he was told that his wife wasn't going to make it. And I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that look in that man's eyes. We did our best to make her comfortable, and she passed away very soon after that, very quickly, very peacefully. And it was likely a heart attack. But it's something that sticks by you when you notice these aren't just patients you're treating people's lives, you know, and the people attached to them as well.
Have you worked with any young people who have been tested positive for corona?
Good question. No. So because I do lots of adult medicine, so I don't really see anyone under the age of 18. In all honesty, I have yet to see, actually the youngest person I've seen who's COVID positive was, I think, 24 with cancer. But I haven't seen anyone younger than that. We do have colleagues in the NHS who are young, who have made the news, unfortunately, for contracting coronavirus and unfortunately passing away with it. It's a terrible condition because it's non-discriminate, it is random with regards to its severity, and it can even strike the young. And it makes it difficult because you feel invincible as a young person. It might even be tempting to, you know, escape from the lockdown, meet up with your friends, do all sorts of things. But actually, it's not just the symptoms of coronavirus that are the problem and that could be lethal. You know, you could go home, you might not have the symptoms of coronavirus, and you might just give it to your elderly relatives, and that might be lethal to them, and that's the problem here. It really is a tough one, coronavirus. And as I said, I've dealt with young people my age that I've known had coronavirus. Thankfully, most of the people that I know have gotten better. But one of my colleagues, for example, at work has had to take time off due to stress because one of her best friends, who was only age 30, you know, has passed away in the last couple of days. So it's nothing to be trivialized.
When did you join AYP and what made you want to join AYP?
I joined AYP when I was in sixth form, and I think that was in 2006-ish, I think. I joined because my friends joined. I was new to the country. I'd moved to London from Dubai in 2005. I didn't have many friends. I spoke with a funny accent. I still do. I just wanted something to do, really. And my friend said, why don't you just become a youth worker in this new organization? And that's how it started off. I just wanted something to have fun with, really, meet people, do something on a Saturday evening, which was what AYP used to be back then. It used to be a weekly youth club every Saturday evening in Harrow. And I got more than I bargained for, actually. I managed to stay with AYP as a youth worker for a good, 8-9 years before I became a senior youth worker for a bit. And then eventually I went on to the board of trustees whilst I was pursuing my medical career. But I held AYP throughout my sixth form and medical school and junior doctor years. And I still remember the days really fondly.
What would you say is your craziest moment at AYP?
So very early on, we were experimenting with a lot of workshops. We've had a fair few crazy moments, especially when we went on residential trips and things like that. But whenever anyone asks me about the maddest moment at AYP, it's virtually one of the few times I've been angry. You can ask the people that know me. I don't get angry very often. I was furious that day. Someone came up with the brilliant idea that we take the young people to Tesco and that we give them a list of items to buy within the shortest time possible, and then they had to go to the customer service till and return all the items that they bought there and then, straight away. I was just a youth worker back then. I just did as I was told. So, we were very organized. We had, briefing papers before and, briefing papers after the youth club. And anyway, we took the kids, and unexpectedly, virtually half the items that we bought from Tesco could not be returned for whatever reason. And obviously the manager of the shop was quite pissed off at us because, well, there's a bunch of rowdy children with rowdy youth workers running around the store buying items and then trying to return them all at the same time. The items that we couldn't return included tampons, included frozen peas, and a few other foodstuff items. And I'll explain, you'll know why I mentioned those two items in a second. So you need to understand, there was a good 15, 20 young people here, boys, and we needed to get them back to the youth club from Tesco, and we managed to get them to the Tesco on the bus. So the first stop was we had to go onto the bus stop. I remember this very clearly. And it was only 5 minutes to wait for the bus, but you give a bunch of teenage boys boxes of tampons, and there's only really one result. We learned very quickly. Tampons were flying all around the bus station. That's all I remember. I remember tampons being thrown everywhere, and I got really annoyed. I was like, guys, come on, like you're representing the youth club. You need to be more mature. You need to be more, come on, guys. You need to respect, your surroundings, etc., etc. Fine. Okay. The tampons, they didn't throw the tampons anymore, which is fine. Okay. Who's that?
That's Nathan.
Hey Nathan, I barely recognized him.
I'm hearing tampons. What's going on?
Yeah, you can hear the story if you want. Anyway, so after a while on the bus stop, we decided that we needed to get onto the bus. So I remember the boys just got onto the bus and I'm like, thank God, we're on our way back to the youth club. This nightmare will end. No more tampons being thrown all around the bus stop. No more tampons being thrown on the bus. I breathed a sigh of relief and I sat down and I thought, great. Except, it was a double-decker bus. Some of the boys had gone upstairs. I was just sitting there, like, just waiting. Everything was quiet. And then all of a sudden, I hear a waterfall. Yeah? You hear this waterfall sound from the stairs, like it's almost like someone was pouring either sand or water or gravel down the steps. And I look up at the steps on the double-decker bus, and there is literally a waterfall of frozen peas coming down the stairs of the double-decker bus. At that point, I went mad. I'll never forget it. I just started screaming. I was like, I don't know what I said. I might have sworn. I don't know. But I don't think anyone had seen me so upset before. And people just quickly sat down. They shut up and they just behaved. And we got to the youth club and it was all right after that. But it's not often you get to accompany a bunch of people and apologize to the general public for tampons being thrown around and then for frozen peas being released on a double-decker bus.
What would you say your funniest moment is at AYP?
Good question. So besides that story that I've just said, we went on a trip to the Isle of Wight. And actually, it's not funny more than anything. It's more sobering, actually. It was a really good trip to the Isle of Wight. We went camping for 3 days, and we had a good mixture of boys who went on the trip. Some of them shy, some of them a bit more boisterous, and we had one particular boisterous boy who was a bit of a bully. So one of the tasks that we had on the camping trip was that we do this thing which happened to me when I was in school. We called it the night walk, and it was sort of an idea that I came up with, where we would drop everyone off in the middle of the night, completely far away from the camp, and then using a map and torches, they have to find their way back to camp. So when I did this in the mountains. There weren't even any lights or anything like that. It was terrifying. So we thought it would be a good character building exercise for these boys, and we split up into groups. Now, one of my fellow youth workers, he's a really cool guy, really heavily bearded guy, already, looks quite firm and steady, started telling ghost stories at the same time as us doing the night walk. And the more stories we told, we had the bully with us, he was in this group. And the kids that he was bullying were in the same group, ironically. The more stories he was telling, the more unsettled this bully started to look like. And the rest of the kids were fine. And then we got to a field. It was a field, remember, this is pitch black, it's probably midnight, there's not a single light anywhere. We got to a field, and all you see are eyes throughout the field. Lots and lots and lots of eyes. It's cows, right? It's the middle of the night. We had to cross the field in the middle of the night, surrounded by just eyes. You can't see anything else. This guy, the bully, I remember very clearly, refused to move. He was terrified. It was funny a bit at the time, but obviously as a youth worker, you can't laugh at someone. You can't, make fun of them. You can't put them down in front of everyone. But you could tell the tables had turned very quickly because everyone else was fine. And everyone else was like, mate, just relax, it's okay. And in actual fact, he wouldn't move. And despite the fact we had child protection laws and things like that, we had to carry him on our backs across the field, past the cows. And he was shaking, he was shivering. Now, after that, his whole demeanor changed. He didn't bully anyone in the camp after that. And he behaved himself. And if he even tried to say anything, anyone just had to say, yo, mate, I remember you in that field last night. And that was enough. I'll admit, it was scary. You had lots of ghost stories. You had, and it was really scary with the cows in the middle of the night and all those eyes and things. But it genuinely, it was a sobering moment for all of us to see that happen, that transformation. And it's something I always remember, actually.
What would you say is your favorite activity at AYP?
Good question. So, this is going to sound really boring, but when I was a youth worker, the favorite thing I had to do, or at least I liked to do the most, I'm going to say two things. At the very beginning, I used to enjoy playing PlayStation. Not because I enjoyed playing the PlayStation, I was terrible. And the kids at youth club knew I was terrible, but they'd still let me play, maybe because they liked to beat me, I don't know. But it was because actually there was no better room in the whole of youth club to start a conversation than the one where you're playing PlayStation with someone. We covered so many conversations at that time when we were playing PlayStation, and that was with everyone. There's something about putting a joystick in someone's hand and then just talking to them whilst they're playing FIFA that just lets them open up. We're talking about, I remember we were talking about really controversial topics at the time for people at that age group. We're talking about, homosexuality and homophobia. We were talking about, knifings and stabbings and gang culture. We were talking about parents, strict parents, absent parents, being brought up in a difficult household, etc. Things that people wouldn't normally talk about, but because they were distracted, they would be more than happy to talk about it at the time. And using the exact same analogy, I like to play the guitar in my spare time, and there was a time where I brought my guitar into youth club. And I remember it was a girls' youth club that I brought it into. And I remember for some of the girls, it was the first time they'd ever seen a musical instrument. And for a lot of them, it was the first time they'd touched one. And for them, it was hugely eye-opening. I mean, for me, I play the guitar all the time. It's not a big deal. For them, they were, it was almost like an act of rebellion for them being able to hold something. A lot of them said, oh, my parents would never let me play a musical instrument. Or if my parents saw me holding one of these, they would kill me. And then the whole discussion became about, how would you like to be brought up? What would you like to achieve? How would you do that? What is the relationship you have with your parents, etc.? That was my favorite aspect of AYP, being able to really explore issues, not invasively, but just naturally through conversation, through interactions. I really, really enjoyed that.
So we know recently you just got married. Congratulations. How is marriage life treating you?
You know what? Married life is not treating me at all, and I'll explain why. So as you're aware, we're in coronavirus season, and actually I got married roughly 2 weeks before lockdown. So I had my honeymoon. I was supposed to go to Turkey for my honeymoon. And that didn't happen, obviously, because of what happened with coronavirus. So instead, I quickly booked a flight to Edinburgh. Only 3 days that we stayed in Edinburgh, and then we came back to London, and then lockdown happened. So you can, me and my wife, we live separately because she's currently working in Shrewsbury, which is in Shropshire, which is about a 2.5 hour drive from London. So lockdown was announced, and me and my wife were separate. I have not seen my wife since lockdown. So as you can imagine, we've had to be very creative, but we've made the best of it. I mean, despite not having seen my newlywed wife, you know, since the beginning of lockdown, you know, we are approaching a month, you know, event, you know, soon. We Skype every day for many hours. We have Skype dates. So, you know, I dress up, I wear a shirt. I mean, I don't dress up underneath because it doesn't matter because it's on Skype. So I just wear a shirt and a tie, and like I get my dinner in front of the camera, and then we like eat, etc. We Skype Netflix together. So we do that on a daily basis. We watch, you know, we've been watching Money Heist recently on Netflix together. So that's about it, really. You know, we just do that every day. We catch up every day, and we have to have time face-to-face on Skype every single day. Otherwise, we would go crazy. You know, it's not easy.
So, do you have any special hidden talents?
I'm not particularly talented, no, but I try and play the guitar. Yeah. I do that from time to time. I'm assuming you've asked me that question because you want me to play it.
Yes, please.
I haven't played in a while, so it's going to get a bit rusty. This is Father and Son by Cat Stevens. And it's not time to make a change. Just relax and take it easy. Just imagine after your fall, there's still much you have to go through. Find a girl, settle down, and if you want, you can marry. Look at me, I am old, but I'm happy. I was once like you are now, and I know that it's not easy to be calm when you found something going on. Take your time, think a lot, think of everything you got, but you will still be here tomorrow, but your dreams may not. And how can I try to explain? Oh, when I do, he turns away again. It's always the same old story. From the moment I could talk, I was ordered to listen. Now there's a way that I know that I have to go away. I know that I have to go.
Like, are you up for any singing lessons for me, please?
I can't sing, mate.
You can. Look, you just did it.
Anyway,
That was very good.
played a few of those chords all wrong at the end, but anyway.
To wrap it up, in regards to this pandemic, do you have any advice for the young people?
Yes. I mean, it's going to be boring. It's going to be long. It's going to be frustrating, and it's going to be tempting. All of those things are going to be happening, but stay at home. There's literally no point in going out because you're going to risk maybe not your own lives, but most likely the lives of those who matter to you. So parents, grandparents, relatives. So as young people, you might feel invincible, and you might feel that you know, you're not going to get infected, but actually young people are very good vectors. You know, they are carriers of the virus more than, you know, symptomatic of the virus. So you don't want to be carrying this virus to those that matter to you, and you don't want to be carrying it around the city or around your area and affecting, more vulnerable people who are trying to hide away from it. This is something that you can grow up and say, I lived during the time of coronavirus and I did my part and I was proud of what I did. It's going to be boring. It's going to be tempting to leave and socialize and meet up with your mates or whatever, but it really isn't worth it. And coming from someone who works in hospital and seeing the effects of coronavirus on not just the patients, on the patients' families as well, it's absolutely horrific. You don't want to be facilitating that for those people. You want to make things get away quicker, and you want things to improve as soon as possible. And the only way to do that is to stay at home, practice social distancing, wash your hands, and be careful. And if you are going out, try your best to stay away from other people as much as possible. If you can wear a mask, if you think you've got a cough or anything like that, then definitely wear a mask. And actually, wash your hands is the most important advice I can give you. But by all means, stay at home, please. No amount of mask wearing and no amount of protecting yourself outdoors is anywhere near as good as staying at home.
Thank you for joining AYP in this interview, and a huge thank you to Dr. Latif for taking time out of his day to let us interview him. Continue following AYP on Snapchat, Instagram and Facebook, because there are a lot more interviews to come, such as with Ben Gill, Councillor Mohammed, Preacher Mohsen Lims, and Sarah, the CEO of Wayne Media, and many more people. If you have suggestions of who you want us to interview, please DM the AYP Instagram.
Okay, everyone, goodbye.
We hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like and subscribe. For more information, you can follow our socials, which will be linked in the description below.
We also have a fundraiser for Evan to help our youth centre turn food bank, delivering food to the most vulnerable. The link for the fundraiser will be in the description below. Thank you.